It's okay, you can record me all you want. He's a fucking little scumbag.
Okay.
Just like you.
Okay.
I don't care. You can tell your father's gonna go to jail too.
Okay.
Because I have video of him driving.
Okay.
Watch.
Okay.
Watch, you little bitch. That's what you are. A little fucking bitch. Where's Daddy in Oklahoma? Where is he? Your father Jake wants nothing to do with your stupid you psychopath. I'm stupid? Look at yourself. Nobody wants you. Your own mother sent you to a hospital. Don't you realize that? I didn't want any kid. And I told your nutty mother that 8 years ago. Because I saw how she acted with you. That's why, you dumb.
Birdie, are you okay?
Daddy Dan's going to jail because I have video of him driving.
Yeah.
Remember the fucking alcoholic who drove with you drunk in a car? You dumb
Children are a gift from God. They express the art of love. We can all agree that they illuminate any room with unmatched energy, a sense of curiosity and wonder. They grow into adults, but the inner child will always remain. But one of the most depressing events is when they are traumatized as children, never to talk about it enduring the pain that will cost them an abundance of life. Before we get into this video, I would like to encourage anyone that have been through any trauma to share your stories and share stories of you overcoming them. As someone who's been through childhood trauma, I feel as if this topic is not covered enough, as we tend to bury trauma deep within our souls and not ever talking about it, and this can do more harm than good. Without further ado, please watch this full video and share it. Childhood trauma is a deeply impactful experience that shapes the psychological, emotional, and even physical aspects of a developing individual. It can arise from a wide range of causes, including emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, chronic neglect, household dysfunction, bullying, and exposure to violence, whether in the home or the broader community. Some children witness domestic abuse, while others may live in environments rife with instability due to parental substance misuse, mental illness, or incarceration. In still other scenarios, children face trauma within institutional settings such as schools, foster systems, or residential facilities. Regardless of its specific origin, childhood trauma leaves an imprint that can endure well beyond the formative years, exerting a profound influence on one's worldview, relationships, and overall well-being. The concept of trauma in psychological discussions centers not only on the nature of the adverse event, but also on the child's subjective response, the extent to which an experience overwhelms their ability to cope or feel safe. Renowned psychiatrist Dr. Bessel van der Kolk points out in The Body Keeps the Score that trauma remains insidiously in the body as well as the mind, manifesting later as anxiety, depression, or physical health challenges. Indeed, the child who experiences significant trauma may internalize a pervasive sense of fear and helplessness, which can skew self-image and hinder the capacity to form healthy attachments. Philosophical traditions have explored the facets of suffering and human resilience for centuries. From the ancient Stoics, who underscored the importance of inner fortitude in the face of hardship, to modern existential thinkers like Viktor Frankl, who championed the search for meaning even in the direst circumstances, we find numerous insights that enrich psychological frameworks of healing. Philosophy can serve as a broader scaffold that asks penetrating questions about identity, autonomy, and the purpose of grappling with pain. Introduction to childhood trauma. Childhood trauma differs from adult trauma in part because of the child's developmental vulnerabilities. Children are inherently dependent, both physically and emotionally. Their brains, bodies, and social capacities are still developing, making them acutely sensitive to stressors. An event that might be distressing but manageable for an adult can be profoundly destabilizing for a child who lacks mature coping skills and a well-established support network. The significance of secure attachment in early childhood cannot be overstated. a child's emotional development is heavily guided by caregivers who respond, or fail to respond, to that child's cues and needs. When a caregiver is abusive, neglectful, or inconsistent, the child often absorbs this behavior as a fundamental lesson about the nature of the world and their worthiness within it. In The Deepest Well, pediatrician Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris discusses the concept of adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and outlines how they correlate with poorer health outcomes later in life. Her work provides a medical framework that links early adversity to chronic health issues such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and even shortened lifespans. The ACE study, conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, in collaboration with Kaiser Permanente, established that the more categories of childhood trauma a person experiences, the higher their risk for negative health outcomes in adulthood. This research underscores the pervasive and long-lasting repercussions of childhood trauma, elevating it from a private emotional concern to a public health issue. Defining what constitutes childhood trauma involves recognizing its varied forms. Some trauma is explicit and acute, such as a single event involving violence or a sudden catastrophic occurrence. Other forms, like ongoing emotional neglect or exposure to family dysfunction, can be more insidious, yet just as damaging. Complex trauma involves repeated, chronic interpersonal violations, often carried out by a caregiver, making the child's immediate environment a source of threat rather than a refuge. Recognizing the breadth of possible traumatic scenarios helps to expand our understanding of who might be affected and why certain individuals exhibit specific symptoms or coping styles. Childhood trauma is often as much about what does not happen, lack of safety, nurture, or validation, as it is about what does happen, the abuse or overtly threatening event. This distinction is crucial because children, by their developmental stage, may not have the language or conceptual frameworks to articulate their experiences. They rely on nonverbal cues, emotional resonance with caregivers, and implicit lessons about safety and love. When these lessons revolve around fear, unpredictability, or indifference, children can develop maladaptive strategies that color the rest of their lives if unaddressed. Psychological perspectives on childhood trauma. Attachment theory, formulated by John Bowlby and built upon by Mary Ainsworth, provides one of the clearest lenses for understanding the impact of childhood trauma. Bowlby posited that infants have an innate drive to form an emotional bond with a primary caregiver, and the security of this bond sets the stage for all future relational patterns. Ainsworth's seminal strange situation experiments categorize these patterns into secure attachment, anxious ambivalent attachment, and anxious avoidant attachment, and later the concept of disorganized attachment was introduced. Children who experience trauma, particularly if their caregiver is the source of it, may develop disorganized attachment characterized by contradictory or chaotic behaviors in the face of caregiving. This insecurity or disorganization can carry into adulthood, manifesting as a chronic struggle to trust others, deep-seated fears of abandonment, or an inability to form stable and nurturing bonds. Psychoanalytic perspectives, drawing from Sigmund Freud's foundational ideas, and further refined by analysts like Melanie Klein, Donald Winnicott, and John Bowlby himself, who integrated psychoanalytic principles with observational research, highlight how early experiences shape the unconscious mind. Freud emphasized that repressed traumatic memories can lead to neurosis or other mental health issues in adulthood. Later theorists added nuances, such as the concept of good enough mothering by Winnicott, suggesting that while perfect caregiving is impossible, consistent presence and validation go a long way in preventing the formation of pathological defenses. Childhood trauma in these views can lead children to employ defense mechanisms like splitting, repression, or dissociation, which may evolve into entrenched patterns if left unexamined. Behaviorist and social learning theories, championed by psychologists such as John B. Watson, B.F. Skinner, and Albert Bandura, focus on how observable behaviors are shaped by the environment. From a behaviorist perspective, trauma can condition a child to associate certain stimuli, sounds, expressions, phrases with danger, leading them to adopt avoidance or aggressive behaviors that might have been adaptive in a hostile home environment, but become maladaptive in more benign settings later on. For instance, a child who learns that any display of vulnerability is met with punishment may carry an entrenched belief that showing emotions is unsafe, leading to emotional numbness in adult life. Cognitive behavioral perspectives, associated with Aaron Beck and later refined in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, TFCBT, suggest that trauma distorts core beliefs about the self, the world, and the future. A child who is repeatedly neglected or verbally abused might internalize a belief that they are unlovable or inherently flawed. Over time, such beliefs turn into self-fulfilling prophecies, shaping how the individual interprets new experiences. Retraining these cognitive filters, often by identifying and challenging negative automatic thoughts, is a central focus of many therapeutic approaches, targeting adult survivors of childhood trauma. The neurobiological lens has gained prominence in recent decades. Research by experts like Dr. Martin Teicher has demonstrated how prolonged exposure to stress hormones can alter the developing brain's architecture. The amygdala, which registers threats, may become overactive, while the hippocampus, involved in memory and learning, can be suppressed or damaged. Chronic stress can also disrupt the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal (HPA) axis, leading to hormonal imbalances that fuel anxiety, depression, and other conditions. Bessel van der Kolk, in The Body Keeps the Score, underscores the significance of these physiological changes, illustrating how talk therapy alone may be insufficient if the body itself remains stuck in a fight-or-flight pattern. Body-centered or somatic approaches, such as those pioneered by Peter Levine in Waking the Tiger, address the physical imprint of trauma. Levine's somatic experiencing method encourages individuals to become aware of bodily sensations and tension patterns, suggesting that the physiological energy of trauma remains locked in the body. By slowly unwinding these stress responses, survivors can re-establish a sense of safety and agency. This somatic approach can be especially beneficial for those who find it difficult to verbalize their experiences or who are overwhelmed by psychological re-exposure to traumatic memories. Philosophical reflections on childhood trauma. Philosophers have long wrestled with the question of suffering, why it exists, how it shapes us, and whether it can be transformed into a catalyst for personal growth. While not all philosophical treatises address childhood trauma directly, many of the existential issues they explore map seamlessly onto the experiences of trauma survivors. Existential philosophy, through figures like Jean-Paul Sartre and Viktor Frankl, contemplates the notion that human beings must create meaning in a world fraught with pain, unpredictability, and isolation. Frankl's experience in the Holocaust led him to assert that even in the most harrowing conditions, individuals retain the freedom to choose their stance towards suffering. For someone coping with childhood trauma, this can be empowering. It suggests that while you cannot alter the past, you can find purpose in the aftermath, possibly by using your experiences to empathize with others or to advocate against abuse. Stoicism, originating in ancient Greece and Rome with philosophers like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, encourages the development of inner virtue and self-control. According to Stoic thought, external hardships are less within our control than our internal responses. While this perspective can be taken to extremes, potentially dismissing the legitimate pain of trauma survivors, it can also be a source of strength, learning to differentiate between what is within one's power, interpretations, decisions, moral character, and what is not, the behavior of an abuser, past events, may provide a survivor with a clearer sense of agency. Buddhist philosophy introduces the concept of dukkha, often translated as suffering or dissatisfaction inherent in life. The Four Noble Truths identify suffering's causes, clinging, ignorance, and aversion, and propose a path to reduce it through mindful awareness and ethical conduct. For trauma survivors, mindfulness practices, such as those presented in many modern therapeutic modalities, can help cultivate a non-judgmental observation of intrusive thoughts and painful sensations. Over time, this shift in perspective can lessen the intensity of traumatic triggers and related emotional turmoil. The question of personal identity is also relevant to childhood trauma. British philosopher John Locke claimed that self-hood arises from the continuity of consciousness and memory leads to a quandary if traumatic memories are repressed or fragmented. David Hume's assertion that the self is a bundle of ever-changing perceptions might offer a way to rethink identity after trauma, suggesting that one can adopt new habits, beliefs, and perspectives to move beyond a painful past. Meanwhile, more contemporary philosophers might focus on how power dynamics, social injustice, and interpersonal ethics contribute to traumatic experiences. These philosophical lenses are not prescriptions for dealing with trauma, but rather frameworks for interpreting suffering, responsibility, and the possibility of growth. They enrich the clinical perspective by pointing to deeper existential dimensions, how one's sense of self and world can be shattered by trauma, and how reflection, introspection, and conscious choice might serve as pathways to reconstruction and empowerment. Manifestations of childhood trauma in adulthood. Adult survivors of childhood trauma may encounter an array of psychological, emotional, and physical challenges. Relationship difficulties are often among the most prominent, given how formative early attachments are. A person with a history of childhood abuse or neglect might exhibit clinginess or dependency in intimate relationships, fearing abandonment and constantly seeking reassurance. Alternatively, they might adopt avoidant or dismissive strategies, maintaining emotional distance to prevent being hurt again. The disorganized attachment style, in which a person vacillates between craving closeness and then pushing it away, can lead to tumultuous partnerships in adulthood. Emotional dysregulation frequently surfaces as anxiety, depression, or volatile mood swings. In Trauma and Recovery, Judith Herman describes how survivors can oscillate between numbness and intense emotional flooding, sometimes accompanied by flashbacks, nightmares, or panic attacks. Over time, these symptoms can become woven into the daily fabric of the individual's life, shaping personality traits and overall worldview. Many survivors of chronic childhood trauma develop hypervigilance, always scanning their environment for signs of danger, which can be psychologically and physically exhausting. Beyond emotional and relational patterns, physical health issues can emerge. Research into the ACE study clarifies that adverse childhood experiences are correlated with elevated risks of obesity, heart disease, autoimmune disorders, and even certain cancers. The chronic release of cortisol and adrenaline due to a stressful or unsafe home environment contributes to systemic inflammation and impairs immune function. Dr. Burke Harris's work illuminates how these biological processes continue to shape adult health, challenging any simplistic separation of emotional trauma from physical well-being. Addictive behaviors, whether involving substances, food, or compulsive activities like gambling, are often rooted in attempts to self-soothe the residual pain of trauma. Dr. Gabor Mate, in the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, discusses how addictions can be traced to early deficits in connection or safety, with substances offering a reprieve. Rather than viewing addiction merely as a moral failing or a disease, Mate frames it as a maladaptive response to deep emotional wounds, suggesting that genuine recovery must address the underlying trauma rather than focusing solely on the addictive behavior. Self-esteem and identity can also be profoundly shaped by childhood trauma. Survivors may harbor a pervasive sense of shame, an internalized belief of being fundamentally flawed or undeserving of love. Brené Brown's research on shame highlights how it thrives in isolation and secrecy, preventing individuals from seeking help or sharing their burdens. Some may sabotage their successes or push away supportive people due to an ingrained script that they do not deserve good things. Others might overcompensate, becoming perfectionists or high achievers to prove their worthiness, all while concealing a gnawing sense of inadequacy. Reenactment is another powerful phenomenon. Survivors may unconsciously recreate the dynamics of their past trauma in adult relationships or workplaces. A person who grew up with an emotionally unavailable parent might repeatedly choose partners who are distant or critical, unknowingly seeking a chance to fix the original situation. Psychoanalytic theory views this as an attempt to master unresolved conflicts, though it often leads to repeated disappointment or further harm. Recognizing these patterns is a critical step toward meaningful change, as it allows individuals to understand why they might gravitate to certain destructive relationships or circumstances. Paths to healing and recovery. No single path to recovery suits all survivors. Rather, a multifaceted approach that recognizes the emotional, cognitive, and somatic residues of trauma tends to be most effective. Psychotherapy is a cornerstone, with various modalities targeting different dimensions of the traumatic experience. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, focuses on identifying and restructuring distorted thoughts and beliefs. Within that framework, trauma-focused CBT, TFCBT, is specifically tailored to address the needs of children and adolescents, though its principles can also benefit adults who are processing early life trauma. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, has gained recognition for its efficacy in helping survivors process traumatic memories. Developed by Francine Shapiro, EMDR uses bilateral stimulation, often through directed eye movements, to integrate traumatic memories so that they lose their overwhelming intensity. One of the advantages of EMDR is that it does not always require the survivor to narrate the full details of the trauma repeatedly. The process can unfold more internally, with the therapist guiding the client through specific protocols. Somatic therapies, such as Peter Levine's somatic experiencing or Pat Ogden's sensoromotor psychotherapy, aim to address the physiological imprint of trauma. By focusing on bodily sensations, tension, and impulses, these approaches help survivors gradually release trapped energy from past threats. Techniques might include breathwork, gentle movements, or guided awareness of sensations, providing a sense of safety and reconnection to the body, a body that the traumatized individual may have learned to ignore or dissociate from as a means of coping. Internal Family Systems, IFS, created by Richard Schwartz, treats the psyche as an internal family of parts, each with distinct emotions, beliefs, and roles. Childhood trauma may cause certain parts to become exiled, carrying intense shame or fear, while other parts take on protective or managerial roles, such as anger or perfectionism. The goal of IFS therapy is to cultivate the self, a state of compassionate awareness, so that these wounded parts can be understood and integrated rather than repressed or battled against. Pharmacological intervention is sometimes necessary, especially when survivors grapple with severe anxiety, depression, or PTSD symptoms that interfere with daily functioning. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, or other classes of medication can stabilize mood and anxiety to a degree that allows deeper therapeutic work to proceed. It is important to view medication not as a cure, but as one tool in a comprehensive treatment plan that also includes therapy, lifestyle modifications, and social support. Self-help strategies can be invaluable for survivors who may not have immediate access to therapy or who wish to supplement their professional treatment. Guided journals, mindfulness apps, and trauma-informed online forums can offer psychoeducation and practical coping skills. Books like Childhood Disrupted by Donna Jackson. Nakazawa provide an accessible overview of how early adversity can become embedded in the body and brain, while also offering steps toward healing. Nakazawa covers everything from immune system dysregulation to tips for stress reduction and narratives of resilience, making the book a helpful resource for readers wanting both scientific explanations and actionable guidance. For survivors seeking to delve into philosophical angles of healing, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning offers a potent lesson in reclaiming personal agency through purpose. While Frankl's experiences involved extreme historical trauma, many of his insights are universal, stressing that individuals can endure great suffering if they perceive a reason or meaning behind it. Likewise, modern Stoicism-based self-help books, which often integrate the teachings of Epictetus or Marcus Aurelius, can provide cognitive strategies for reframing challenges and focusing on what can be controlled in the present moment. Lifestyle and holistic practices often play a critical role in trauma recovery. Exercise releases endorphins and can help regulate mood. Yoga, especially trauma-informed yoga, introduces gentle movement and breath awareness conducive to re-establishing a sense of safety in one's body. Nutrition is another key area, as chronic stress can deplete vital nutrients and disrupt gut health, which in turn affects mental health. Similarly, establishing consistent sleep routines can reduce the physiological strain associated with trauma. Journaling, art therapy, and other forms of creative expression enable survivors to process emotions that might still be pre-verbal or hard to articulate in standard talk therapy. Social support and community resources are also pivotal. Support groups, whether in person or online, allow survivors to share experiences and learn from one another in a non-judgmental setting. Within these communities, there is often a strong sense of relief in discovering that one's feelings and reactions are not abnormal, but rather common responses to extraordinary adversity. This sense of validation can be transformative, mitigating the shame and isolation that often accompany trauma histories. Case studies and illustration. Consider the story of Elena, who endured years of emotional neglect from a caregiver with untreated mental illness. As a child, Elena was expected to be self-reliant and not burden her parent with her emotional needs. This left her feeling invisible and unworthy of attention. In adulthood, Elena began to recognize that she oscillated between intense loneliness and the impulse to withdraw from any form of intimacy. Reading The Body Keeps the Score illuminated how her childhood environment led to hypervigilance and disconnection. She discovered a local therapist trained in somatic experiencing, finding that focusing on her body's sensations helped her access grief and anger she had long suppressed. Over time, Elena also joined a mindfulness meditation group, where she cultivated self-compassion and learned to stay present with difficult emotions. Combining these interventions with journaling, recommended by her therapist, allowed Elena to rewrite the narrative of her childhood, separating her self-worth from the neglect she experienced. Gradually, she found healthier ways to engage in relationships, ultimately forging more secure attachments in her adult life. A different illustration might be Jacob, who lived through physical abuse in a chaotic home. As an adult, he grappled with an explosive temper and impulsive outbursts, particularly under stress. Cognitive behavioral therapy helped Jacob identify the triggers and underlying beliefs fueling his rage, that the world was fundamentally hostile and that aggression was necessary for self-protection. He also explored EMDR with a trauma-informed specialist, processing painful memories of childhood beatings in a way that lessened their visceral hold on him. Inspired by reading Man's Search for Meaning, Jacob began volunteering at a local youth shelter, discovering that contributing to others' well-being gave a powerful sense of purpose that counteracted his lingering cynicism. Over time, he reported fewer flashbacks and found constructive avenues to channel his energy, such as advocacy and community work, philosophical and existential integration. While clinical interventions address symptoms and maladaptive patterns, philosophy can provide a deeper existential context. Many survivors of childhood trauma wrestle with questions of, why me? Or, what does this mean for my life? The idea of post-traumatic growth suggests that some individuals may undergo a transformation that leads to higher levels of empathy, emotional depth, and psychological resilience. This growth does not diminish the seriousness of the original injury, but rather underscores the human capacity for adaptation and finding a renewed sense of self after profound adversity. Existential therapy or discussion groups sometimes integrate the work of philosophers like Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, and Heidegger to probe questions about authenticity, freedom, and the role suffering plays in shaping identity. Such discussions can supplement traditional therapy by helping individuals identify guiding values or choose purposeful actions in line with what truly matters to them. For those who are spiritually inclined, religious or faith-based frameworks can also offer community, rituals, and a sense of cosmic or divine significance that helps contextualize personal suffering. It is important to remember that philosophical perspectives, while enriching, are not substitutes for mental health care. A child who has survived severe abuse or neglect may need immediate, evidence-based intervention to stabilize symptoms before they can comfortably engage in higher-level existential inquiries. Once a survivor feels sufficiently safe and supported, however, exploring existential or spiritual dimensions can be a vital component of holistic healing. Practical advice on using reference books and other resources. Many survivors or those supporting them may wonder how to best utilize reference books in their healing journey. Books like The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk offer a thorough examination of the neurobiological effects of trauma, showing how it alters brain function and implicating the body in ways readers may find affirming or enlightening. V. under Kolk includes discussions on therapies that have shown promise, such as yoga, EMDR, neurofeedback, and more. This text can help survivors recognize that their symptoms are not signs of personal weakness, but rather understandable physiological and psychological reactions to unsafe conditions. Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman is another essential reference that outlines the stages of recovery from trauma, beginning with establishing safety and moving toward remembrance, mourning, and reconnection. Herman's historical perspective places trauma in a social context, demonstrating how it has been alternately recognized and ignored by the mental health establishment. This book can help survivors identify where they are in the healing process and what next steps might support their progress. Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine invites readers to look at how wild animals naturally cope with threats without developing the chronic symptoms humans do. This book is highly accessible and can introduce the concept of somatic experiencing as a gentle way to release pent-up stress. Readers may find exercises that they can practice at home, though Levine repeatedly emphasizes the importance of professional guidance for deep or more complicated trauma work. Childhood Disrupted by Donna Jackson. Nakazawa focuses on the direct links between early adversity and adult health. Nakazawa merges personal narratives, interviews, and scientific research to illustrate how experiences like neglect, parental divorce, or living with a mentally ill caregiver can precipitate autoimmune diseases, obesity, or chronic pain. Crucially, she includes sections on recovery, discussing lifestyle interventions, therapy modalities, and mindfulness practices that can offset or even reverse some of the damage inflicted by toxic stress in childhood. For a reader who wants to understand the interplay between trauma and physical health and is seeking practical steps to improve their well-being, this book is particularly relevant. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, though focused on the Holocaust, transcends historical context in its core message. Human beings can find meaning even under conditions of extreme suffering. Survivors may draw inspiration from Frankl's emphasis on personal responsibility and the creative capacity to choose one's attitude, regardless of external constraints. For those overwhelmed by a sense of purposelessness or despair, Frankl's account can serve as a reminder that there is always a potential to forge a path aligned with personal convictions and compassion. The Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Gabor Mate is especially useful for those struggling with addictive behaviors or wanting to understand how trauma fosters addiction. Mate blends personal stories with scientific insight, emphasizing compassion over judgment. This perspective can be especially validating for individuals who have been harshly judged for substance dependence without anyone acknowledging the traumatic roots that may underlie it. When engaging with these texts, it can be valuable to pace the reading, especially for those whose trauma is severe. Survivors may encounter triggers or emotional flashbacks. Setting aside time to process emotional responses, possibly discussing insights with a therapist or supportive friend, can make the experience more beneficial. Journaling, highlighting significant passages, and noting questions to bring to therapy sessions can deepen the impact of these books. Additionally, considering that trauma often isolates individuals, reading and discussing these works in a group or with a trusted confidant can help mitigate loneliness and shame. Long-term integration and hope. Healing from childhood trauma is not a linear journey with a clear endpoint. Many survivors find that layers of trauma unfold over time, with new memories or realizations emerging at unexpected moments. Therapy, particularly trauma-focused modalities, often proceed in stages, starting with establishing emotional and physical safety before delving into the deeper aspects of memory processing and integration. As Herman notes in Trauma and Recovery, reconnection with the community and with one's sense of agency is a critical final step, transforming what was once a source of terror into a platform for empowerment and advocacy. For survivors who reach a place of relative stability, the goal often shifts to maintenance and growth. This can mean sustained involvement in communities that resonate with their experiences, such as peer support groups, spiritual circles, or civic organizations, or ongoing personal development through new hobbies, career changes, or creative endeavors. The adult who once felt helpless as a child may find profound meaning in volunteering for child welfare organizations or raising awareness about mental health. Hope arises from understanding that trauma need not define a person's entire existence. With proper intervention, supportive relationships, and ongoing self-reflection, many survivors develop what researchers call post-traumatic growth, a deepened sense of gratitude, wisdom, and compassion that stems from having navigated adversity. Though it does not erase the pain of the past, this growth can offer a renewed perspective on life's value and possibilities. Additional practical strategies and reflections for readers. Many survivors of childhood trauma find it helpful to blend insights from multiple sources, weaving together personalized strategies that address their unique histories and present-day circumstances. The process of healing often involves experimentation. What resonates with one person may not be equally effective for another. Below are a few additional reflections and practical steps that can complement the guidance offered by the reference books mentioned. One of the first aspects survivors often grapple with is acknowledging that their childhood experiences were, in fact, traumatic. Children naturally normalize their environments, even when those environments are dangerous or neglectful, because they lack external points of comparison. Adult survivors may thus minimize or rationalize their experiences. Reading books like Childhood Disrupted or The Deepest Well can provide the language and research needed to recognize that certain adverse conditions, whether emotional neglect or exposure to domestic violence, meet the clinical criteria for trauma. This acknowledgement is often the initial and vital step that paves the way for deeper healing. After establishing this recognition, it can be beneficial to explore the possibility of professional support. Trauma-informed therapists are trained to address the complexities of early adversity, using modalities like EMDR, somatic experiencing, or internal family systems. For those unsure where to begin, consulting resources like the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies, ISTSS, or local mental health directories can help in finding qualified professionals. In many regions, non-profit organizations offer low-cost or sliding-scale therapy, and some employers include mental health services in their benefits packages. In addition to professional support, creating a personal toolkit of coping strategies can be invaluable. This toolkit might include breathing exercises, grounding techniques, and creative outlets that resonate with one's interests. By paying close attention to moments of distress or overwhelm, survivors can learn to identify which specific coping tools work best under different emotional states. For instance, a brief mindfulness practice might help calm a racing mind when anxiety spikes, while writing in a journal may be more useful for processing a flashback or sudden emotional memory. Physical activities are often recommended by clinicians and authors alike. Practices such as Tai Chi, Qigong, or dance therapy can unlock sensations and emotions that have been stored in the body for years. Engaging in these activities does not require prior experience or high athletic ability. Rather, they encourage gentle movement and present moment awareness. One may also find comfort in nature-based activities, such as hiking or gardening, to reconnect with feelings of groundedness and wonder. Self-compassion, as discussed by psychologists like Kristen Neff, is another crucial element in healing. Many childhood trauma survivors carry harsh inner critics and struggle to extend kindness toward themselves. Reading works on self-compassion or practicing guided meditations that focus on self-forgiveness can gradually soften these internal narratives. Over time, survivors may begin to replace self-blame or shame with understanding and tenderness. For those who enjoy group experiences, bibliotherapy or book clubs focused on trauma-related literature can provide community and dialogue. People might gather, in person or online, to discuss The Body Keeps the Score or other texts, sharing personal insights and practical takeaways. Such communal reading experiences normalize the struggles that come with trauma recovery and offer multiple perspectives on integrating the material into daily life. Religious and spiritual frameworks may also play a role in recovery. Some survivors find solace in prayer, meditation centers, or spiritual counseling that offers a sense of transcendent belonging. Others may prefer strictly secular approaches, focusing on philosophical explorations of meaning and personal freedom. Regardless of the path, the key is authenticity, embracing beliefs and practices that feel personally meaningful, rather than performing them out of obligation. Cultural contexts also shape how individuals experience and heal from childhood trauma. In some communities, discussing family issues with outsiders may be seen as taboo, and survivors could feel added layers of guilt or betrayal in seeking therapeutic help. In these cases, it can be empowering to learn about the concept of intergenerational trauma, how unresolved pain passes from one generation to the next. Books such as It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallen delve into this territory, demonstrating that healing personal trauma can also begin to disrupt ancestral cycles of harm. In culturally sensitive therapies, practitioners strive to respect traditions and communal values while providing tools for individual well-being. For survivors who have reached a point of some stability, focusing on future aspirations can be a motivating force. Engaging in education or vocational training, pursuing hobbies, or joining advocacy groups related to childhood welfare can all serve as powerful ways to channel one's energy. Purpose and direction help to counteract the lingering echoes of helplessness that often stem from early trauma. Each accomplishment, however small, can bolster self-efficacy and reinforce the sense that life holds possibilities beyond the imprint of the past. Maintaining boundaries is another significant aspect. As survivors progress in their recovery, they may realize that certain relationships are toxic or re-traumatizing. While it can be painful to limit contact with family members or friends who perpetuate harmful dynamics, establishing firm boundaries is often essential for sustained healing. This can entail having frank conversations about unacceptable behaviors, or in some cases, choosing minimal or no contact if the other party continues to be abusive or manipulative. Therapists, support groups, and guided journaling can offer practical frameworks for navigating these tough but necessary decisions. It is also crucial to recognize that healing journeys are rarely linear. Unexpected triggers, anniversaries of traumatic events, or new life stresses can cause old symptoms to resurface. Rather than viewing these experiences as failures, it can be helpful to frame them as part of the ongoing spiral of recovery. As survivors gain more tools and insights, they can respond to setbacks with quicker resilience, harnessing the self-awareness and coping skills they have cultivated. For children currently living in traumatic conditions, intervention and protective measures become paramount. Caregivers, educators, and community members who suspect a child is in danger should be informed about reporting protocols in their jurisdiction to Child Protective Services or equivalent agencies. Early interventions can prevent compounding harm and, if at all possible, connect the child with supportive environments that can bolster resilience. Reading materials like Dr. Bruce Perry's The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog can shed light on how early therapeutic engagement and safe caregiving relationships can dramatically change the trajectory of a child's development. Across all these strategies, self-awareness stands out as a guiding principle. Whether a survivor uses mindfulness, therapy, creative expression, or supportive reading, the ability to recognize one's internal states and respond appropriately is key. Over time, This attentiveness can transform from a survival mechanism into a profound strength, as survivors become adept at not only managing triggers, but also cultivating deeper connections and empathy for others. While the road to recovery from childhood trauma can be arduous, the capacity for post-traumatic growth remains a beacon of hope. Survivors frequently report that once they find their footing, they appreciate life's moments with heightened sincerity, value genuine relationships more deeply, and discover reserves of resilience they never imagined. Such transformations do not negate the reality of the harm done, but they affirm that the human spirit is capable of alchemizing adversity into wisdom, compassion, and a future shaped by intention rather than fear. Expanding the circle of support. Another dimension worth considering is the role of broader social networks in fostering resilience. Family members, friends, teachers, and community leaders can be instrumental in validating a child's experiences and offering tangible help. In adulthood, mentors, co-workers, or social media communities can become sources of solidarity and shared insight. This collective support system is especially significant when formal mental health services are inaccessible or cost-prohibitive. Churches, temples, and other faith communities may also provide spiritual guidance, counseling resources, or material assistance, thereby lessening a survivor's sense of isolation. Organizations dedicated to children's welfare and mental health activism can further contribute to a culture where trauma awareness is the norm rather than the exception. By engaging with such groups, survivors can shift from a purely individual pursuit of healing to a collective endeavor, helping to shape policies and community practices that prioritize prevention and early intervention. Volunteering, participating in local advocacy campaigns, or sharing personal stories when one is ready can amplify the voices of survivors and bring deeper societal understanding to the far-reaching impact of childhood adversity. In this light, each person's healing journey ripples outward, potentially influencing families, neighborhoods, and entire systems. While the immediate focus may be on personal recovery, many who have moved through significant healing discover a calling to pay it forward. Whether this arises as a dedicated profession in counseling, social work, or education, or as an informal role, offering empathy and guidance to friends, the resonance of overcoming childhood trauma can inspire meaningful change. In turn, these collective efforts reinforce a feedback loop of compassion, knowledge, and community support, underscoring the transformative power that arises when individual healing merges with broader social consciousness. Conclusion. Childhood trauma is a multi-layered issue that permeates the mind, body, and spirit. Early experiences of abuse, neglect, or dysfunctional environments can significantly shape a child's developing brain, self-concept, and approach to relationships. These wounds, if left unaddressed, often reverberate throughout adulthood, manifesting in emotional dysregulation, relational instability, chronic health problems, or destructive coping strategies. However, research across psychology, medicine, and philosophy indicates that healing is possible and that individuals can reclaim a sense of safety, identity, and even joy. From a psychological standpoint, modalities such as EMDR, somatic experiencing, internal family systems, and CBT/TFCBT have demonstrated efficacy in helping survivors process and integrate traumatic memories, reshape negative beliefs, and rebuild the capacity for secure attachment. Neuroscientific findings underscore the importance of addressing trauma at the bodily level, prompting an embrace of somatic and holistic therapies. Philosophical traditions, whether Stoic, Existential, or Buddhist, provide existential roadmaps that highlight meaning, choice, and transformation in the face of suffering. Reference books like The Body Keeps the Score, Trauma and Recovery, Waking the Tiger, Childhood Disrupted, Man's Search for Meaning, and In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts can deepen one's understanding of trauma, validating the complexity of its impact and offering concrete steps toward healing. Whether through detailed explanations of the neurobiology of stress, stage-based approaches to recovery, somatic exercises, or existential reflections on purpose, these works serve as valuable companions. They remind readers that although trauma may cast a long shadow, there remains a capacity for growth, connection, and the creation of a life that feels truly one's own. Survivors who pursue therapy or self-help should recognize that patience and self-compassion are key. Unraveling the effects of trauma can be a delicate process, sometimes reactivating old wounds. Yet every small act of self-care, every moment spent in mindful awareness, and every supportive conversation gradually reinforce new neural pathways and emotional habits. In many cases, survivors discover that the very sensitivities that once made them vulnerable become sources of empathy, creativity, and intuitive understanding of others. Ultimately, acknowledging and working through childhood trauma is an act of courage. It challenges individuals to confront deep-seated hurt, but it also opens doors to renewed intimacy, a healthier self-image, and a genuinely meaningful existence. Whether one's path involves formal psychotherapy, somatic work, spiritual exploration, or a combination of these, the overarching message of both psychological research and philosophical wisdom is that adversity need not be the final word. With the right support, resources, and determination, survivors can transcend the limitations imposed by early trauma, forging lives marked by authenticity, resilience, and love. References and suggested reading. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk explores how trauma imprints on the brain and body and examines various therapeutic modalities, ranging from EMDR to yoga to encourage holistic healing. Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman discusses the stages of trauma recovery, providing a historical and socio-political context for how trauma has been understood, emphasizes the processes of establishing safety, remembrance, mourning, and reconnection. Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine introduces somatic experiencing and explains how animals naturally respond to threats, offers exercises and insights to help survivors complete the stress cycle and restore a sense of safety in their bodies. Childhood Disrupted by Donna Jackson Nakazawa details the ACE study and the scientific research connecting early adversity to physical diseases in adulthood, presents pathways to improve physical and emotional health through integrative practices. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl provides an existential lens on how individuals can find meaning in suffering. Though set against the backdrop of the Holocaust, its core lessons on resilience and purpose are universal. In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Gabor Mate focuses on addiction as a response to unresolved trauma, advocating for a compassionate understanding of its roots, suggests that healing must address emotional suffering, not merely the addictive behavior. The Deepest Well by Nadine Burke Harris examines the medical ramifications of adverse childhood experiences, linking them to chronic illnesses, advocates for early intervention, public health strategies, and a trauma-informed approach in pediatric care. Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay C. Gibson explores how growing up with caregivers who are unable to properly nurture children's emotional development can lead to ongoing relational and self-esteem issues while outlining strategies to heal. It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wallin delves into the concept of intergenerational trauma, illustrating how patterns of unresolved pain can pass through family lines, offers insights and exercises for breaking these cycles and forging healthier family dynamics. The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Bruce D. Perry and Maya Zalovitz provides case studies of childhood trauma and highlights how timely, compassionate interventions can alter a child's developmental trajectory, emphasizing the power of attachment and care. These references each offer a different perspective on understanding and working through childhood trauma. Whether one is looking for practical exercises, scientific validation, existential reflection, or a combination of all three, these texts can serve as roadmaps on the path to recovery. Ideally, they are most beneficial when read alongside or in consultation with professional therapy and supportive community engagement.